Life is full of dualities, light and darkness, joy and sorrow. In our society, there exists a curious double standard when it comes to women, an invisible scale that weighs their worth, their actions, and their roles differently than those of men. This double standard is not always obvious, yet its influence is pervasive, shaping how women are perceived, treated, and judged. It is a silent force woven deeply into the fabric of our culture, guiding expectations, limiting freedom, and often leaving women caught between conflicting roles and identities. Today we explore this intricate web and question how we as individuals and as a society can challenge and change this inequitable standard. Life as we experience it is full of dualities. We live in a world defined by contrasts, light and darkness, joy and sorrow, love and hate. These dualities are not simply opposites, but are integral parts of a larger whole, constantly in motion, constantly shifting. One cannot exist without the other, and they are interdependent in shaping our reality. We find ourselves navigating through these opposites every day, sometimes unaware of their subtle influence. Yet there is one particular duality in our society that stands out, quietly shaping the lives of half the population in ways that are both profound and limiting the double standard for women. The double standard is not always apparent. It does not announce itself in bold headlines or obvious declarations. Instead, it exists in the silent, unspoken rules of social interaction, in the expectations of behavior that are imposed upon women, and in the judgments that society often reserves exclusively for them. This invisible scale measures the worth of a woman's actions, her choices, her body, and her voice, weighing them differently than it would for a man. It is a standard that has been deeply woven into the fabric of our culture, handed down through generations, and has become so normalized that it's almost invisible to many of us. It is a force that shapes perceptions of women in ways that are rarely questioned, even though its impact can be felt everywhere in the workplace, in relationships, in the media, and in our personal lives. At its core, the double standard for women presents a paradox. Women are simultaneously idealized and scrutinized, revered for their nurturing qualities, and yet condemned for their independence. They are expected to be pure, virtuous, and selfless, but also empowered to be free, strong, and sexually liberated. These expectations, though seemingly progressive, often exist in direct opposition to one another, creating a tension that women must navigate throughout their lives. The paradox lies in the fact that no matter how much they adhere to one set of expectations, there is always another waiting to judge them for it. Take, for example, the way society views women's behavior. When a woman exhibits confidence or assertiveness, she may be labeled as aggressive or unlikable, while a man displaying the same traits is often seen as a leader or a force to be reckoned with. When a woman embraces her sexuality, she is often labeled as promiscuous or immoral, while a man in the same situation may be admired for his charisma or charm. These discrepancies in judgment are not just random, they are deeply ingrained in the cultural narrative that has been handed down to us for centuries. It is a narrative that has taught us to judge women more harshly, to hold them to different standards, and to place them under a microscope in ways that are not applied to their male counterparts. This invisible yet pervasive force has profound implications. Women often find themselves caught in a cycle of self-doubt, constantly questioning whether they are meeting society's expectations or whether they are being judged for breaking away from them. It can feel like a never-ending balancing act, trying to live authentically, while also appeasing the demands of a society that is ever ready to criticize and label. The struggle is not just internal but external as well. Society places women under constant scrutiny, forcing them to adhere to unrealistic standards of beauty, behavior, and success. Women's bodies, for instance, are often treated as objects to be analyzed and critiqued, while men's bodies are rarely subjected to the same level of invasive judgment. However, the double standard is not an issue isolated to women alone. It reflects a deeper societal imbalance, a fundamental misunderstanding of what it means to be human. At its heart, the double standard denies the complexity and richness of human experience. It fails to recognize that both men and women are complex beings, capable of embodying a wide range of qualities and behaviors that are not confined by rigid categories. It is an issue that transcends gender and speaks to the broader need for balance and equality in all aspects of life. The double standard, then, is not just an issue for women to confront, it is an issue for all of us to challenge. It invites us to question how we view each other, how we judge one another, and how we can begin to reshape the narratives that have been built around gender. By recognizing the existence of this double standard and reflecting on its impact, we open the door to a more balanced and inclusive society, one where individuals are free to express themselves without fear of judgment or limitation. It is only by facing this duality head-on that we can hope to move beyond it, towards a more harmonious and equitable way of living. The double standard that women face is a deeply ingrained and complex phenomenon, woven into the fabric of our societal structure in ways that often go unnoticed. It is not a simple, easily identifiable issue, rather, it is an intricate system of expectations, biases, and judgments that operate on a subconscious level. It manifests in countless ways, from the expectations placed on women in their roles as daughters, mothers, and workers, to the ways in which their actions and choices are interpreted and evaluated differently than those of men. The nature of this double standard is multifaceted, built upon the foundation of historical, cultural, and social norms that continue to influence how we perceive women today. At its essence, the double standard is a system that privileges one set of behaviors or characteristics while condemning the same behaviors when exhibited by another group, in this case women. It is a reflection of the way society assigns value and meaning to certain qualities based on gender, even though these qualities are not inherently gendered. A woman's assertiveness may be viewed as pushy or domineering, while a man displaying the same level of confidence is considered strong or ambitious. Similarly, a woman's independence may be labeled as selfish or cold, while a man's independence is seen as a sign of personal strength and self-sufficiency. These subtle but powerful distinctions are not accidental, they are part of a larger narrative that has been cultivated over centuries, one that casts women in roles that are often defined by their relationship to others rather than their individuality. One of the core aspects of the double standard is the way it restricts the freedom of women by holding them to unattainably high standards of behavior. Women are often expected to embody a narrow range of qualities. They must be nurturing, modest, and self-sacrificial, but not too self-sacrificial, as they are also expected to be ambitious and successful. They are told to be confident but not arrogant, intelligent but not intimidating, attractive but not vain. These contradictory expectations create a tension that is difficult, if not impossible, to navigate. So, women are simultaneously encouraged to embrace their personal power and success, but when they do so, they are often faced with criticism and judgment. The same behaviors that are rewarded in men are frequently punished in women, creating a double standard that leaves women feeling as though they are constantly walking a tightrope. Moreover, the double standard also operates on a much broader societal level. Women's bodies, for instance, are often objectified, scrutinized, and regulated in ways that men's bodies are not. The focus on women's physical appearance, whether it's their weight, their clothes, or their age, has become a cultural obsession, leading to the constant policing of women's bodies. This focus often overshadows their intelligence, creativity, or other qualities that contribute to their worth as individuals. Women are expected to maintain a certain standard of beauty, and when they fail to meet these expectations, they face harsh judgment. This societal fixation on appearance creates a paradox. Women are encouraged to be attractive, yet when they draw attention to their physical selves, they are often criticized for being vain or self-centered. Again, this double standard holds women to a different standard, one that does not apply to men in the same way. The double standard also reinforces traditional gender roles, limiting the possibilities available to both men and women. For women, it limits the ways in which they can express themselves and their ambitions. For men, it enforces a rigid idea of masculinity, where emotional vulnerability, nurturing, or cooperation may be seen as signs of weakness. These narrow definitions of what it means to be a woman or a man are not only restrictive but also damaging, as they fail to account for the complexity and diversity of human experience. By enforcing these standards, society traps both genders in boxes limiting their potential and their ability to fully express themselves in ways that are authentic to who they are. What is most troubling about the double standard is how deeply it is ingrained in our culture. It is not just an external force that affects women, but something that women themselves internalize over time. They grow up learning that certain behaviors, attitudes, and appearances are expected of them, and they often begin to shape their identities around these imposed standards. This internalization of the double standard can lead to feelings of guilt, shame, and inadequacy as women struggle to meet the contradictory demands placed upon them. It becomes a silent force that shapes their choices, their relationships, and their understanding of themselves, often without their full awareness. The nature of the double standard is insidious because it operates not just through explicit rules, but through cultural norms and subtle judgments. It is embedded in the language we use, the media we consume, and the way we raise our children. It teaches us to value certain traits over others, to associate certain behaviors with particular genders, and to judge those who fail to conform to these expectations. And while progress has been made in many areas, the double standard remains a pervasive force in shaping how women are viewed and treated in society. To challenge the double standard requires a deeper examination of the cultural narratives we uphold, a willingness to question long-held beliefs, and a commitment to creating a world where individuals are free to define themselves outside the constraints of outdated gender norms. The historical context of the double standard for women is deeply rooted in centuries of cultural, religious, and societal norms that have shaped how women are perceived and treated. This context did not emerge overnight, nor is it a modern phenomenon. It has evolved over time, deeply embedded in the systems of patriarchy, class, and religion that have dominated much of human history. From ancient civilizations to the present day, the roles and expectations of women have been defined by a strict set of rules that often place them in subordinate positions relative to men. The double standard we see today is the result of this long history, and understanding its origins is essential to comprehending its continued impact on society. In early human societies, gender roles were often shaped by survival needs and physical differences. Men were typically seen as hunters, warriors, and providers, while women were assigned the roles of nurturers and caregivers, responsible for the home and children. While these roles were essential for the survival of the community, they were also shaped by assumptions about the inherent capabilities and worth of each gender. The dichotomy of purity and freedom is one of the most insidious and contradictory aspects of the double standard imposed on women. Throughout history, women have been expected to embody purity, chastity, and moral integrity, while simultaneously being told they must embrace their freedom and independence in various areas of life. These two concepts, purity and freedom, are presented as ideal qualities for women to possess, yet they are fundamentally at odds with one another, creating a tension that has shaped women's experiences for centuries. This contradiction has permeated every aspect of women's lives, from their relationships to their careers, to their bodies, and even their very identities. Purity has long been associated with femininity. For centuries, women were seen as the moral guardians of society, expected to embody a form of innocence that could not be tainted by the corrupting influences of the outside world. This concept of purity was most often expressed through a woman's sexual behavior, where virginity and chastity were not just personal choices but societal expectations. A woman's value was frequently measured by her ability to maintain her purity, which often meant conforming to a strict set of rules about her sexuality. She was expected to remain modest, unassuming, and untouched until marriage, and once married she was expected to remain faithful and virtuous. Deviations from this ideal of purity were often met with harsh judgment, and women who strayed from these expectations were stigmatized as promiscuous or immoral. The idea of purity was not only about sexual behavior, it extended to all aspects of a woman's life, from her behavior in public to the way she dressed, spoke, and interacted with others. At the same time, women were told they must also be free to express themselves, free to work, free to make choices about their own lives. The idea of freedom has been a cornerstone of modern gender movements, from the suffrage movement to the feminist movements of the 20th and 21st centuries. Women were encouraged to break out of the traditional roles of wife and mother, to seek independence, to pursue careers, and to live life on their own terms. This call for freedom, however, often existed in tension with the ideal of purity. Women were told they could have it all: the career, the partner, the children, and the freedom to define their own identities. But the reality was that these two ideals, the pure woman and the free woman, were not always compatible. When women sought to embrace their freedom, particularly in areas of sexuality, independence, and professional achievement, they often faced backlash. A woman who expressed sexual agency outside of marriage, for example, was often condemned, even though men were allowed to do so without facing similar judgment. Women who sought to build careers or who took on leadership roles were often labeled as too ambitious or unnatural, as though their pursuit of freedom somehow diminished their value as women. These judgments created a paradox in which women were encouraged to break free of societal constraints, yet were simultaneously judged for doing so in ways that violated the traditional ideals of purity and modesty. This dichotomy is especially evident when it comes to the way women's bodies are perceived and treated. In many societies, women's bodies are objectified, but they are also expected to remain pure and untarnished. The modern media, for example, promotes a very specific standard of beauty: youthful, slim, and flawless, while at the same time selling the idea of sexual freedom and empowerment. Women are encouraged to be sexually liberated, yet they are simultaneously held to an impossible standard of physical purity. The message is clear: women must be attractive and desirable, but not too sexual. They must embody both the virgin and the temptress, and the line between these two extremes is often blurred and difficult to navigate. The tension between purity and freedom extends into relationships as well. Women are often expected to be self-sacrificing and devoted in relationships, placing the needs of their partners and children above their own. At the same time, they are encouraged to assert their independence and maintain a sense of personal freedom. These conflicting demands create an inner conflict for many women, who may struggle to balance the roles of caregiver and independent individual. The ideal of purity often requires women to be submissive, to prioritize the well-being of others over their own desires, while freedom calls for women to assert themselves, to claim their own space, and to live life on their own terms. What makes this dichotomy even more complex is that both ideals are often used as tools of control. Women are praised for their purity but punished when they seek freedom. When they conform to the ideal of purity, they are lauded for their virtue, but when they strive for independence, they are often met with suspicion and scorn. The idea of purity, tied so strongly to women's identity, becomes a tool used to limit their freedom. It reinforces the idea that a woman's worth is tied to her sexual behavior, her devotion to others, and her adherence to societal norms, rather than her ability to define her own life and choices. This contradiction leaves many women in a perpetual state of tension, trying to navigate between the opposing forces of purity and freedom. For some, it becomes an impossible balancing act. Women are told that their worth lies in their ability to maintain a pure and virtuous identity, while also being encouraged to break free of these traditional constraints. The reality is that women, like men, should not have to choose between these ideals. Purity and freedom need not be in opposition. A woman's worth is not determined by her adherence to outdated notions of purity or her ability to conform to societal expectations of freedom. True empowerment comes when these dualities are reconciled, when women are free to be themselves without judgment, without restriction, and without the weight of contradictory expectations. The relationship between behavior and judgment is one of the most deeply ingrained elements of the double standard imposed on women. Society consistently evaluates women's actions through a lens that is vastly different from the lens applied to men, especially when it comes to qualities like assertiveness, ambition, and sexuality. These judgments, often harsh and unwarranted, are not simply personal opinions, but rather a reflection of broader societal norms that shape the way women are expected to behave. Women are subjected to constant scrutiny, and the behaviors that society expects from them are defined by a complex web of contradictory and restrictive rules. One of the most striking ways in which behavior is judged differently for women is in the realm of assertiveness and confidence. In many cultures, men are encouraged to be assertive, outspoken, and confident in expressing their opinions, especially in professional and public spaces. These qualities are often associated with leadership, success, and intelligence. Women, on the other hand, are frequently judged harshly for exhibiting the same traits. When a woman displays confidence or assertiveness, she is often labeled as aggressive, bossy, or even unlikable. This judgment stems from long-standing gender expectations that women should be passive, agreeable, and accommodating. The same traits that make a man appear capable and strong are frequently interpreted as negative in women, leading to the perception that women who display assertiveness are somehow less feminine, less approachable, or even unworthy of leadership positions. This bias also extends to the way ambition is viewed. Women with high ambitions, whether in their careers, personal lives, or in their pursuit of education, are often subject to criticism. Ambition in women is often seen as suspect, as though women who want more for themselves are challenging the societal expectations of their proper role. Men, by contrast, are often encouraged to be ambitious, driven, and goal-oriented, with their success celebrated as the result of hard work and dedication. The ambitious woman, however, is frequently cast in a different light. She may be seen as selfish, ungrateful, or overly competitive. There is a pervasive idea that women should not be too focused on their own success, particularly if it comes at the expense of their role as caregivers or their commitment to family life. This double standard results in women being judged for pursuing their goals and dreams, while men are praised for doing the same. One of the most damaging aspects of behavior and judgment in the context of the double standard is the way in which women's sexuality is scrutinized and policed. Women are often expected to be sexually modest and chaste, especially in cultures that place a strong emphasis on female purity. A woman's sexual behavior, especially outside of marriage, is subject to intense scrutiny. When women embrace their sexuality, they are frequently labeled as promiscuous, immoral, or attention-seeking. This judgment reflects deeply entrenched ideas about women's roles as caretakers and mothers, where their sexuality is seen as something to be protected and kept in check. In contrast, men are often praised for their sexual exploits and are not judged as harshly for engaging in similar behaviors. Men's sexuality is often celebrated as a sign of masculinity, while women's sexuality is viewed through a much narrower, more restrictive lens. This discrepancy in judgment creates a significant burden on women. Many women grow up learning that their worth is tied to their behavior, particularly in relation to how they manage their sexuality, their ambition, and their assertiveness. A woman who embraces her freedom, whether through pursuing a career, speaking her mind, or expressing her sexuality, is often left to grapple with the social consequences of such behaviors. The judgments she faces are not simply the result of individual biases, but are part of a broader cultural narrative that teaches women to behave in a certain way. These judgments are internalized by many women, leading to feelings of shame, self-doubt, and insecurity. They may feel as though they are constantly walking a tightrope, trying to meet society's contradictory expectations while also trying to remain true to themselves. The double standard also manifests in the way women's behavior is judged in comparison to men's in social and professional settings. For example, a man who is outspoken in a meeting is seen as a confident and capable individual, while a woman who behaves similarly may be seen as domineering or overly aggressive. In the workplace, women who assert themselves or take charge in a project may be labeled as difficult or pushy, while men exhibiting the same behavior are often celebrated as decisive or strong leaders. This type of judgment not only discourages women from expressing their opinions and pursuing their ambitions, but also limits their opportunities for growth and advancement. The fear of being judged negatively often leads women to temper their behavior, leading to an ongoing cycle of self-censorship and self-doubt. In conclusion, the double standard is not just a problem for women, but a societal issue that affects us all. It reflects deep-rooted beliefs about gender, power, and identity that have shaped culture for centuries. While women have made progress, the fight for true equality is ongoing. The double standard limits not only women but also men, constraining them by rigid gender expectations. To dismantle these norms, we must shift how we view gender and human behavior, fostering a culture where individuals are valued for their unique qualities, free from prescriptive roles. This shift requires collective action. We must take responsibility for reshaping how we raise children, interact professionally, and perceive one another. It involves advocating for policies that support gender equality and teaching both boys and girls that they do not need to conform to outdated gender roles. Additionally, on a cultural level, we must change the narrative around women's roles, recognizing that empowering women benefits society as a whole.